I'm not really that ambitious, you know. Things motivate you to behave in certain ways. I'm so happy to be back. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Wow, this place is looking amazing. I walk in and it's like, wait a minute, is this the right church? I like the colors, the drapes, they soften things, and it's just so congratulations on all the work that you've done. And you've certainly taken what was a crazy hailstorm and you did this with that. I have a new roof, so we'll see what happens. So that was a perfect reading, Barbara. It had the magic word in it, grace. Today I'm talking about grace. And part of being, we're talking about our true nature for this month. And of course, I believe that qualities like grace and compassion and love and freedom and liberty, all the things that Ernest Holmes talks about too, are part of our true nature. So I'm going to try to give you a story that kind of illustrates what I think of a high example of grace. And I have my flute because I'm going to also play a song that's about grace, which you all know. So I'll put this away real quick. So it was about 1988 on the Pine Ridge Reservation up in South Dakota. Anyone been there to the Pine Ridge Nation? Well, if you've ever been there, up to Pine Ridge, it's a reservation where the Sioux live now, and driving through it, I've been up there, and driving through it, it kind of makes the developing world look posh by comparison. So in other words, they don't have a lot, they don't have much, but they certainly have a deep sense of pride in who they are, deep sense of connection to the tribe and to the people. So in 1988, there was a young woman named Sue Ann Big Crow. Sue Ann Big Crow had grown up in a broken home, a really kind of tough family life, but she loved sports, and she looked up to this track star, whose name I can't remember at the time, but she looked up at that track star and she said, that's what I want to do whenever I grow up. And alcohol is a serious problem on Pine Ridge. So she said, I'm never going to drink, I'm never going to do drugs, I'm not going to do any of those stuff that everyone else is doing. Instead, I'm going to excel. So she ran and ran, she ran track, and she ran so fast. She was super fast. And then she started playing basketball in her freshman year. And she loved basketball. So what she would do, she had read somewhere that if you do something 10,000 times, that you'll become good at it. So she would bounce the basketball 1,000 times a day in each hand. And her family says, stop it, you know. And of course, they didn't have a goal or anything or a basket, so she would do layups on the rain gutter until she broke it, you know. And so her lifelong ambition was to dunk. So she had her cousin stand underneath the rain gutter, and then she would jump up just to feel and step on her cousin's back just to feel what it would, you know, what a dunk would feel like. She looked up to Magic Johnson. That was one of her big heroes at the time. So she played for the Lady Thorpes in Pine Ridge. The Lady Thorpes were the basketball team there. And they were, of course, named after Jim Thorpe. Anybody know about Jim Thorpe? Yeah, famous Native American athlete. So the Lady Thorpes went up to a little town called Lead, South Dakota. Now Lead, little town, about 3,500 people, a mining town. And it was real poor. It was rural. It was kind of a rough town, and they did not like the Native Americans one bit, you know. So, in fact, there weren't any that actually lived there, but they would go there to shop and stuff. And whenever they were shopping, you know, they would make fun of them and they would call them names. This one clerk, this man had the man who came up, who wrote this story, the story that I'm using. Well, he was in line once, and he said, "What are all those Native Americans doing over there in line?" She said, "Oh, it's okay. They're used to it. They're Indian. They have to wait for everything, you know." And just laughed about it. And so, you know, just the typical things that we do to dehumanize other populations. And so they had a big night. The Pine Ridge Lady Thorpes drove up to Lead, South Dakota, going to play a big game. I mean, it was like a district game, not the championship, but a real important game. So it was traditional for the visiting team to come out on the court and do warm-ups and do laps, and then the hosting team would come up and do the same. So the Lady Thorpes had lined up to go out, and they would line up by tallest down to, you know, shortest. But this tall girl, Donica, you know, she's pretty tall for an Indian girl, you know, like 5'4". No, she was much taller than that. I'm sorry. These are Sioux people, not my people. My people are the Mayan and the Apache people. Yeah, I always say that we're closer to the earth than most people, you know. So they're getting ready to go out, and they start hearing this jeering. Hey, ho, 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 making fun of going, whoa, 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 doing all those derogatory things, just to try to psych out the opponents. Now, they were kind of used to that, but there was a real vengeance in the air that particular night. Now, I grew up in Hobbs, New Mexico, and we have the most winningest high school basketball coach in the nation, Ralph Tasker. So I know basketball. Like whenever the people from Clovis would come to play us, we'd all take out newspapers, you know, and so it'd be silence, you know, and so that kind of thing. But these people were yelling, and they were saying, commodity cheese, where's the cheese? To make fun of their commodity cheese. Supposedly they had beer cans that they were throwing out there too, really intimidating the heck out of these young women. So Danica said, I didn't want to go out there. There's no way. I'm not going out there, you know. So Sue Ann Big Crow said, well, what's the problem? And she was a freshman at the time, but she was on the basketball team. And so she says, I'll go first. And they're like, no, what are you going to do? You're not going to embarrass us, are you? She said, no, I'm going to go first. And so they run out there, and the people are yelling, hey, ho, wah, ho, ho, anything that they could do. Where's the cheese? Where's the cheese? Where's the beer? Where's the beer? All kinds of things. And these girls are terrified, except Sue and Big Crow. So she's at the front, and she's running to midcourt, and suddenly she just stops right in midcourt, you know, where they do the free throw. And all her teammates run into her, you know, boom, boom, boom. And they said, what are you doing? Keep going, Sue Ann, keep going. She's like, no, she's listening to them go, hey. So she throws the basketball to her friend. She takes off her warm-up jacket. She puts it on her shoulder like a shawl. And she starts doing the Sioux shawl dance to their music. Hey. And she's going like that and swaying. And then she starts singing that beautiful Lakota song. And the audience, the people, the crowd is stunned. They're like, what? So she turned it around and gave it right back. And it was silence from what people say. And then, so she grabs the ball again, jumps up, and she runs up midcourt, and she does a layup, and she lands it, then she does a lap. And the whole place is cheering. The gymnasium is going crazy. So what she did was take that moment that could be just so disheartening and soul-crushing, and she found her grace. So I'm going to be talking about that today, how you can, when life presents you with stuff like that, the title of my talk is In Your Grace, which comes from in your face. So we're going to learn to be in your grace. And so I'm going to move to a couple of more short stories. One is the song Amazing Grace. Do you guys know about that? I think you're going to play it, aren't you? I didn't bring the right key flute, but it's all good. Amazing Grace, you know the story of where that song came from? So it was penned by John Newton. He was a British fella back in the early 1700s. He was pretty much a hot mess. You know, he had tried this, he had tried that. His dad said go into the Navy. He'd almost died quite a few different times just because he just had some real problems, you know. So then he got involved with the slave trade. And so he started rising up those ranks, and so he was a slave trader at that time, and so he would take part in that. And there was one night at sea that was particularly bad, and so he cried out and he said, "God, if you save me, I'll turn my life around." And he was saved from drowning. So he kind of turned his life around, and he wrote the words right shortly thereafter to Amazing Grace. And he worked with this poet and this other songwriter, and then they came out with these hymns that they had, because he also joined the clergy. He did a serious transformation, he did, like doing it all at once. So that song, Amazing Grace, some people say that the melody is based on an old Scottish sea shanty, which just about everything is, as far as American folk music goes. But the story of that I've always found sort of inspiring. And that's a song that I really love and that I play a lot. I play it during my shows, and I play it at memorial services and that kind of thing. I play it when I'm at hospice. I also play that too. It's a song that has, for whatever reason, some kind of resonance with all of us. But the tie-in that I'm going to tell you with that, my last story to sort of illustrate grace, is in, I think it's about 1826. Don't quote me on that because I can't remember all the dates. But 1826 or thereabouts, gold was discovered in Georgia, the state of Georgia. And gold was discovered there. So all of a sudden, these politicians came up with this idea, well, we need that land, even though it was Native American land at the time, mostly Cherokee, some Choctaw. And so they said, well, we need that land. So there was a big to-do, kind of like similar to what's going on with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and the DAPL pipeline and stuff that's happening. It just has so much resonance with this story. So some of the missionaries, they began to protest, and they said, well, this is their land. And so this is a great story. Some of those missionaries were arrested, they were thrown in jail, they were thrown out of the state. But so a lot of people had moved, a lot of the Native American tribes had moved, but 17,000 were left, and I forgot what they call it, the Indian Act or something like that. They moved 17,000 Native Americans, mostly Cherokee, but Seminole, Choctaw, some slaves, bunch of different other tribes, that because the United States wanted that gold that was in Georgia. So they moved these people on what's called the Trail of Tears. So they moved from their homelands from Tennessee and Georgia and those areas. They moved them to Oklahoma. There wasn't anything in Oklahoma at the time except just prairie and a whole lot of dust. So they forcibly marched them I think it was like a 1,400-mile walk. I should know. I drive that pretty regularly, but in a car. So they moved them there, and they walked them there. And along the way, they weren't allowed to tend to their fallen, to their dead, because the government said, we need you to get there in a hurry, just go. So they had been taught amazing grace by the missionaries who had come to, save them. And so along the way, since they couldn't attend to their dead in the traditional way with tobacco and some other things, they started to sing Amazing Grace in the Cherokee language. And if you've never heard it in the Cherokee language, I would advise you to look it up on YouTube. It's really, really powerful. So they weren't able to attend to their dead, so they would sing Amazing Grace in the Cherokee language, and over 5,000, it's estimated, died out of 17,000. So every time that I do Amazing Grace, I tell the story about the Trail of Tears. The Apache people went through a Trail of Tears. The Navajo people had a Trail of Tears. It's a common theme, unfortunately. So I'm just going to play you a verse of Amazing Grace. Kind of put us in that space. So grace. What does grace mean? Like if you're explaining to somebody who had just flown in from Mercury or wherever, and they said, what's this word grace? What would you say? Just throw out anything.
Love.
What was that?
Love.
Love. Beautiful.
Ease.
Kindness. Nice. Love, ease, kindness, compassion. Caring. What was that? Long suffering? I like that because Tennessee Williams said, A high station in life is earned by the gallantry with which appalling experiences are survived with grace. So that's absolutely true as that goes. That's such a great story about the Camos for Good. Myself, and Algernon de Massa, the actor that I work with in Theater Dojo, we were just in San Diego. And one of the acts at the festival where we were playing was a group called Seven Mujeres. There were these Latina women who could dance. They'd make those mountains come down. They danced just amazing. They were so great. They were so empowered and so centered. It was just awesome. But what they do, they have designed these, I wish I could remember what they're called, but they designed these. It's a combination sleeping bag, coat, and suitcase, duffel bag, all in one. And they were demonstrating it. It was really cool. And they were raising money to give 100 of them out to the homeless in San Diego. And there's a lot of homeless in San Diego if you've ever been there, because they kind of have mild, temperatures. But so that's so nice when somebody sees a need, and it is inspiration. It's an inspiration from grace, from spirit, whatever you want to call it, that says that. So good luck with all of that. That's just wonderful. So I'm talking about in your grace, which I get from the term in your face, and that came around about the same time that people were saying, bring it on. It's not one of my favorite terms. But Wayne Dyer, the late Wayne Dyer, said, when you're spiritually connected, you're not looking for occasions to be offended. And you're not judging and labeling others, but you're in a state of grace in which you know that you are connected to God, and thus free from the effects of anyone or anything external to yourself. Isn't that wonderful? So he's saying, when you're in a state of grace, when you're in your true nature, like we're talking about this whole month, you're not going around looking to be offended, to be pissed off, to be angry. Stay off of Facebook, definitely, if you don't want any of those things to happen. But because you're so connected that nothing external can really faze you. I think sometimes people think that they confuse poise with grace, and grace with poise. The way I see poise is when you have poise, you're already in a good position to have poise. Grace is when you fall flat on your face and everyone's laughing at you and you get up anyway and you say, thank you, good day. Take some chutzpah, I guess is the other word. But grace also has a whole lot of baggage to it because we've been taught in so many of our religious backgrounds that grace is something that needs to be awarded to you, given to you, deemed upon you if you're worthy. But I love the way that Ernest Holmes talks about grace in the Science of Mind book. He says, grace is the givingness of the Spirit to its creation. And it's not a special law, but it's a specialized one. In other words, grace is. That's a bumper sticker we need. Grace is. But we need to recognize it, he says. It's not something God imposed upon us. It is the logical result of the correct acceptance of life and a correct relationship to the Spirit. He went on to say, we're saved by grace to the extent that we believe in, accept, and seek to embody the law of good. And the law of good is ever a law of liberty. He talks about that so often, and never one of limitation. That limitation is not a thing, but it's a belief. Freedom is a divine reality, while limitation is an illusion. It's a false belief. And a little later on, he goes on to say that all that the world can give us is small thinking, but that small thinking in the presence of big thinking makes us just feel really lonely. So he says that at some points that we suffer from this primal shame and guilt that we're not good enough, that we're ashamed of who we are, who we're not, who we should have become. A lot of that comes through the comparison. And he says that when that happens, it hides in the unconscious and it's not easily available for healing. It's not brought into the light. So grace has to search it out and turn it into patient goodness instead. That's just beautiful. So the Tao, in the wisdom of the Tao, it says, rushing into action, you fall. Trying to grasp things, you lose them. Therefore, the master takes action by letting things take their course. She remains as calm at the end as at the beginning. So I had this analogy during this week that grace was very much like a river that we can ride, and we can choose to cling onto the side, or we can kind of go with that flow. So what I did is I came up with an acronym, because acronyms are easy for us to remember. So I'm going to give it to you. Grace. First word, G, give. Receive, accept, choice or choose, and empathy. So it's give, receive, accept, choose, and empathy. So when we're trying to live in our grace in the way that this world is, and this has been a challenging year, I got to tell you. It seems like we've been suffering this election cycle for a long time. So let's use this as an example. So when someone comes to tell you that you're wrong, that you need to vote for this candidate, blah, 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 this is how you're going to act with grace. You're first of all, you're going to give. You're going to give the situation a pause. Give yourself a couple of intentional breaths, and give particular attention to the space between those breaths, because that's where the deep peace of your true nature dwells. The next part is accept that you're part of a larger plan that includes peace and love and harmony, all those hippie phrases that, well, they have a lot of resonance because they're true. Sometimes I say to myself when I'm in a particularly bad situation, I will just say, I'm willing to see this differently. And I know I've used this here in the past, but because it's part of my practice. I'm willing to see this differently. I'm willing to see this through the eyes of love. Help me to find the love in this situation. I use those words pretty regularly. And accept how you feel in that situation. The more that we deny how we're feeling, of course, what we resist persists, which we talk about a lot in the New Thought movement. Next one is receive. Receive the wisdom that all things are temporary. All situations are temporary. If you can think and breathe and move, then you're still alive. Receive the knowledge and the wisdom that all your needs in this moment are all being met. That's a really good way to disengage from any tension that could be there. The next part is choose. The choice with intention is so important. Gary Zukav, in his book, The Seat of the Soul, talks a lot about the splintered personality and having to choose between the needs and the wants of the personality versus the ego versus the soul. So think of it as choosing your intention. Think of that as being like on a karmic path. Like if you speak from anger, you're going to create anger. If you speak from compassion, you're going to create the karma of compassion. Basically, unless you're creating and choosing with intention, you are involved in an unconscious evolution through the density of what we call form and matter, and it's a really slow process to evolve that way. Okay, so how do we choose responsibly with grace? First, realize that there's a choice in each situation. There's a choice in how we respond and how we react. Then ask yourself these 3 questions. These are really important questions. So when you want to act with grace and you're in a situation where you're not sure that you can, like what Sue and Big Crow did, ask these questions about your action that you're going to take next. What will this produce? In other words, if I act this way, if I say this word, if I type this stuff, what's it going to produce? What will it cascade into? Do I really want to create that? It's a big one. And am I ready to accept all the consequences of this choice? So by choosing to remain conscious, you choose responsibly, and this is choosing from the soul level, okay? It's not the personality or the ego self, but by choosing that way, it's going to align you with those higher frequencies of love and forgiveness and compassion, the stuff that you first said that you thought grace is, which are absolutely true. It's going to align you with those higher ways of being, your true nature. And what's going to happen, you're going to get guidance from your teachers, from your guides, from spirit. And suddenly options that you didn't think were even possible, boom, will just pop into your head. Like Sue Ann Big Crow. She says, well, you know what? I could do something different. And boy, look what that did. The last one is empathy. Remember, we're all experiencing this same stuff. We're all humans in this space and time. It's just like high school, only better. We hope. But when you allow empathy to enter into any situation, what you do is you break down your own defenses, okay? You dissolve them, but you also dissolve the defenses of the other person. So the way that I phrase it is that everything is energy, including empathy, and that empathy clears out the entanglement of attachments to ideas and egos and wants. So to end, I'm going to end with a nice quote that I found from Adyashanti, a writer, really, really good writer. And Adyashanti says, grace is something that comes to us when we somehow find ourselves completely available. When we become open-hearted and open-minded and are willing to entertain the possibility that we may not know that we may entertain the possibility that we may not know what we think we know. That's why I had trouble with that. So just remember to be in your grace, because that is your true nature. And you're not going to lose anything, but you're going to gain authentic power. And anyone with authentic power in this world today is going to be a force for good. You're going to be like that pebble in the beautiful Clear Mountain Lake. So, thank you. So it is.